Please pray with me. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O God, for you are our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. My mother was a stickler for Advent. She would not hear of putting up a single Christmas decoration until after the fourth Sunday of the season. It didn't matter how much my sister and I begged, we could not put up a Christmas tree or decorate the house with lights until at least December 22nd. When we would complain, she would point out that even December 22nd was a concession on her part. Christmas doesn't even begin until December 25th, she would remind us. And besides, my mother never let us decorate until Christmas Eve. Mom did, however, insist on keeping all of the decorations up until Epiphany on the 6th of January. Those 12 days, the traditional 12 days of Christmas, were a time of joy and celebration with lots of good food and visits with family and friends, and of course, presents. It's good to wait for something, she would say. It teaches us to be patient and to look forward with hope. The tree and heirloom ornaments were wonderful, of course. And I always enjoyed hearing my father curse as he tried to untangle the Christmas lights that we had so meticulously wrapped the previous year. But there was one Christmas decoration that I looked forward to each and every year. The year that my parents had married, a friend had given them a centerpiece for their holiday table. It was a beautiful teardrop-shaped Christmas candle, and it was inside a delicate green glass holder that was cradling the candle. And that holder was frosted and scalloped. It was absolutely gorgeous, and the candle smelled of cedar and spice. It was so beautiful and so fragile. My mother would gently take it from its box and place it in the center of our table, newly adorned with a Christmas tablecloth. Only then could the rest of the decorating begin. That candle was lit only once a year, each Christmas Eve, when we returned from church and we sat down to have our dessert together. Its beautiful glow illumined our feasting and continued to cast its radiance as one member of the family would read the Christmas story. Once the story was finished, either my sister or I were allowed to blow out its flame. Now we are the light, my mother would say. In our reading from John, the author implies that people were flocking to John the Baptist from all over Palestine. They were coming to him because they heard something about him and from him that gave them hope. John courageously named the struggles of that time and place, the things that weighed upon the hearts and minds of people, the things that threatened to crush their very lives. He named them, and he boldly proclaimed that there was liberation from them. By rejecting the status quo, by giving up the desire for comfort and security, by putting the needs of others before one's own, John told them there is to be found true and lasting peace and freedom. The people were so moved by John's words that they submitted to baptism, that is, that ritual cleansing that symbolized their turning away from the concerns of self and embracing the ways of compassion. The experience so moved them that they came to see John as the Messiah, the Christ, the one who would bring liberation. John was quick to deny that identity. He was clear that he wasn't the Messiah, only a harbinger of the one who was to come. It didn't stop the religious and political leaders, though, from becoming anxious about the rumors. They were worried about anyone who might pose a threat to Roman governance and the uneasy peace and unjust stability of that time. That's why they sent those emissaries to the Jordan to demand from John his true identity. The response John offers is quick and concise. I'm not the Messiah, nor am I Elijah or even one of the prophets. John's humility unnerves them. They're expecting him to claim power for himself, but John rejects it. I am only a lone voice from the margins calling people to get ready for the one who is coming. John points to Jesus, the one whose coming will change everything, the one who will bring healing and wholeness in every word and in every touch, the one who truly is the light of the world. The author of the gospel beautifully states that John reflected that light. His whole life was a testimony to the love and the justice of God, and like a lighthouse directing a ship's course through a storm, it pointed the way to a future filled with hope. John's light shone brightly, so brightly that those religious leaders knew there was something special about him. They demanded to know, but John made clear that the light wasn't his own. He was merely reflecting the light of God, the light meant to illuminate the path to a new way of being, a new world redeemed from the heartache and the violence and the suffering of the old one. John was shining the light of God on the path to be traveled by Jesus, the one who would embody that new way of being. There are those who come into our lives every day who through their kindness and their courage reflect the light of God into our world. They shed illumination on the path we struggle to find, a way forward in the midst of the shadows and gloom of this world. Brett Blair tells the story of a pastor who struggled to find a way to proclaim hope in the midst of the 1918 influenza pandemic. Like now, churches and theaters and bars and restaurants were closed to help mitigate the spread of the virus. Those were the days before the internet, television, or even modern radio. The only form of mass communication available was newspapers. And while pastors did publish liturgies and sermons to help keep people inspired at home, as most of us know, the written word alone leaves one's soul thirsty for more. This particular pastor understood that yearning and decided to do something about it. The sanctuary of the church that he served was filled from floor to ceiling with beautiful stained glass windows, but they were only visible on dark nights when the whole sanctuary was filled with light, and that only happened a few times a year, at Christmas and Easter. Though it was already November, there was little chance that year of Christmas Eve service being held in that church due to the pandemic. Wanting very much to inspire the community and remind them of the hope that is found even in the deepest shadows, this pastor came up with a plan. He procured enough spotlights to place at each one of the windows and turned them on each evening at dusk, illuminating the windows for all who would happen to pass by the church, depicting the Annunciation, the birth, the teaching, the ministry, the crucifixion, and the resurrection. The illuminated windows told the story of the life of Jesus and his ministry, and most importantly, his triumph over death. Each evening through the end of the pandemic and the resumption of services at that church, the pastor turned on those spotlights and allowed the light of hope to shine for a community that was so desperate for it. Most of us know the old lullaby, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, or at least the first verse of it. There are actually 5 verses to that song, and while the first one seems innocent enough, the remaining 4 speak of bleak times when light is difficult to find and hope is hard to hold. The lyrics praise the smallest points of light, the fading stars that shine above us, offering what light they can in the midst of the deepest nights. The words of the final verse marvel at the power of those flickering lights. As your bright and tiny spark lights the traveler in the dark, though I know not what you are, twinkle, 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 little star, how I wonder what you are. In these difficult times when the pandemic is raging around us and so many have developed a sense of fatigue in following the necessary safeguards, we can reflect the light of hope by continuing to practice those precautions and by reminding people that there is a light on the horizon as vaccines become available. We can and will get back to something that feels more normal, but we have to be patient. We have to listen to public health officials, and we have to do what's needed to protect those around us. In doing so, we can become like John, pointing to the hope that is ours when we place the good of others ahead of our own concerns and reflecting that light of hope for all to see. Amen.